Hey, welcome everybody. This is the Tom Sumner Program, kind of a back-to-school special, and on this first day of school, it seems somehow appropriate to be starting a couple minutes late.
It does, that's right.
I'm Tom Sumner, here with me, reprising his role from my old radio show, Flint's premier political pundit, Paul Rozycki. Paul,
That's
it's good to see
after
you
a
again.
couple of months of break. It's good to be back at it. Yeah,
I know,
good.
it does feel like we've been on summer vacation
That's right.
or something, and it's been kind of a weird summer. But since we're doing this, just to start out, we'll be doing this on Tuesdays from 3 to 5 live. We'd love to hear from you as well as we get talking about local, state, national politics and the occasional interview. And we have one of those today. In fact, author of this book called Anatomy of a Misfit, Andrea Portes, and that'll be coming up in just a little bit. I spoke with her earlier in the day, and we'll be including that in today's show. We had a lot of fun stuff to talk about.
There's always a lot going on, but there's been a lot in the last couple of months and the last couple of days, as a matter of fact.
Well, this is the first day of the new minimum wage.
Right.
There's always interesting stuff going on with the Flint City Council. We'll get into that probably more in the second part. Yeah. But one of the things, of course, yesterday being Labor Day, the annual walking of the bridge.
That's right, the Mackinac Bridge. In fact, the bridge in Frankenmuth had a walk too, I think.
Did it really?
There was also one in, I think I saw some reference to one in Fenton. I'm not sure what bridge that might have been, but I think there might have been one. But I know Frankenmuth has a little walk across their bridge as well of a similar variety.
Well, I happened to notice something online earlier today that was posted by Walter Smith Randolph from
right.
TV 25, mynbc.com, and he had blogged something that, as soon as I got into it, realized was based largely on things that Paul Rozycki had to say.
In fact, Walter called me yesterday. We were at a friend's house having a barbecue. My cell phone rang, and I told Walter, come on over and have a hot dog, and we'll do a little interview and so forth. So, yeah, we did the interview during a Labor Day hot dog roast.
Well, the nature of the piece was talking about Flint's lack of Labor Day celebrations.
That is
Region 1C didn't have anything. There used to be a big thing out at Crossroads.
That was always a big event. We never missed that.
I remember that one going back to Potter Lake.
Oh, yeah. You may have long memories of that than I do, but at the Crossroads Village one, we were always at that one, and I made at least a number of the ones at Region 1C, so to have nothing at all going on in Flint was, the home of the UAW and all that other kind of stuff was really very, very strange feeling.
Anyway, join us if you would like to call and weigh in and talk about, basically, I guess what we're looking at is yesterday evidence that unions are kind of washed up.
Well, I wouldn't say washed up. I think they're not what they used to be. I think I made the comment in the interview that back in the heyday of the UAW, they had 1.5 million members, I believe the number was. And I think the number now is around 300,000 or 400,000. So they've lost 2/3 or more of their membership in the last 30 or 40 years.
And the telephone number, if you want to call in, it's on the screen. But just in case, 810-208-1854, 208-1854. You're welcome to join the conversation. I wonder about those numbers, because one of the things that I noticed during the last election cycle is that a lot of the union membership now work for the government and not for the private sector.
Absolutely.
So, that those numbers may be apples and oranges.
Yeah, governmental employees, again, they're, the great bulk of those, including teachers, among a lot of others, are unionized. In the private sector, I think it's, again, last number I saw was somewhere around 12% of the private sector was unionized, and among manufacturing, it's even worse than that. I think 7 or 8% of manufacturing is unionized nationwide.
And that 1.5 million,
that was UAW.
That was all UAW.
Yes.
That was all manufacturing. That was all auto workers, and we don't see that anymore. Now Detroit still had a big UAW celebration yesterday.
Joe
the
Biden
Vice
showed
President
up there.
was there.
Yeah.
But we didn't see it in Flint, the birthplace, and it just shows not only how the union has been diminished, But and in particular, we're talking about the UAW.
Yeah, so here in Genesee County, I used to argue there were three main forces that really ran Flint and Genesee County: General Motors, the UAW, and the Mott Foundation. And within the last 30, 40 years, all three of those have diminished a lot or shifted their focus an awful lot. Obviously, GM, we had 80,000 jobs at one point. We might have, maybe 7,000 now, I think, if we're lucky.
And I heard that 80,000 number attributed to UAW membership.
That's right.
That it was in Flint or in Genesee County, it was 80,000 members, and now they're saying 8,000. And I'm thinking, where are there 8,000?
Well, now,
I almost don't even trust the 8,000 number.
Now, there may be a few others. I say in terms of auto workers, the number I've heard for auto workers here is around 7,000 or so. There's others though who are not even auto workers. I know, for example, and is that including retirees? I don't.
In their membership.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I don't think so. But what's interesting now is the UAW growth. Some of that is non-manufacturing. For example, at Mott College, one of our administrators union is UAW, and I think they picked up a number of other totally non-manufacturing, non-auto-related unions over the years. So maybe they get 8,000 that way. I don't know. But the growth has not been an awful lot in manufacturing.
Well, that's like, do we have Teamsters driving snowplows?
That's exactly right. Yeah. I think there's somewhere around here, I don't think it's Flint, but it was in the area, I think there are some nurses who belong to a Teamsters union.
All of the unions, and here's in this article that I was talking about that you were quoted in, they also quote Dan Reyes, who is still president of which
651. That's the one on Longway.
I'm not sure which one.
I may have the wrong number there.
I'm not sure which one, and I'm not sure. He's referred to in the piece as local union leader, Dan Reyes. He took over Art Reyes' position. No. They were concurrent presidents.
Oh, they were
two different.
Okay,
locals.
maybe I got the wrong number then. Because I was thinking of Art Reyes' old union next to the old.
Which I think was 651.
Maybe that's what. Okay, maybe I got the wrong number there.
Dan's is 599.
Okay, yeah, because they had a celebration of the 75th anniversary or something of that union. I think, didn't they? Over the weekend, not on Labor Day, but over the weekend.
Well, he says that. He said this is what Dan Reyes had to say. The battles that were fought in the 1930s are being fought all over again in a totally different generation. Yeah, there are a lot. There are a lot of people who are looking at the 20s and 30s and comparing some of the economic struggles to the ones we're having now.
The hollowing out of the middle class, that kind of thing, and the lowering of the average rate. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities here. Now, the question is whether the response is going to be the same as it was in the 1930s when you saw the organization of the UAW, the steel workers, and lots of other unions really got their kickstart during the Great Depression, when there was huge unemployment, when it really was a grind to be in an auto plant. I think there'll be a pushback, but whether it's going to follow the union route or whether the current middle class who's feeling the pressure now is going to do something else, I don't know. But I do think we're going to see those numbers bounce back a little bit, but I don't think we're ever going to get anywhere near the numbers we saw back in the 1960s and 70s.
Well, but what about the trend of some of these fast food restaurants looking at unionizing and other retail type jobs? Could we see the building of a whole new service sector union?
I think that's entirely possible. Yeah, it may well be, as those jobs are increasingly a large part of the economy, and as more, the minimum wage workers are increasingly not always teenagers. More and more of them are people who are trying to make a full-time living at that kind of thing. So, yeah, I can see the retail sector and the Walmarts of the world, the McDonald's of the world, facing unionization attempts in the years to come.
Well, feel free to join us in the conversation. 208-1854 is the number to call. We'd love to hear from you and share your thoughts as we continue to look at some of the conditions that are going on. Just interesting that all of a sudden it's this year that it's no longer a thing to
It
celebrate.
really, I
in
mean, we
Flint.
take a look at it. I mean, it's been, no matter how you cut, it's been a rough time for unions in general.
Talk about being conspicuous by your absence.
Yeah, I say it was almost a ghost town kind of feeling, as I say, especially out of Crossroads, where they always had a huge celebration out there. In fact, I think in the Sloan Museum, there's a painting somebody's got of the classic, annual celebration for the UAW, and to not have anything at all there. And the same thing at the Region 1C statue there as well. To have nothing going on there is very, very unusual.
Now here's one of the and this seems like kind of a natural sort of progression is to talk about. There's a lot going on today. I mean we've got the the bankruptcy in Detroit.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge issue there. Yeah.
Breaking news from the Middle East. Another
looks
journalist has been beheaded by ISIL. There's a lot going on. It's the first day of school, all of that sort of stuff. But it's also the day that that Michigan's minimum wage goes up.
That's right.
Well, technically it went up yesterday.
For those who were working yesterday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It started September 1st, Labor Day, and it was passed back in May. And I told you just before we started the webcast that I had gone online and pulled up an article by the AP when this was passed back in May.
Yeah.
And the governor signed it, and it's a gradual kind of a rise.
Over the next several years.
740 to it is now 815, and that will it'll go to 850 in 2016, and then on January 1st. 890 in 17 and 925 finally in 18. So it's a graduated rise. But the whole thing was a brilliant strategy to scuttle a ballot initiative.
That's right.
To
it would have been on the ballot in November for 10.10 an hour.
Yep.
If it had, and they had this, they looked like they had the signatures.
Which some states have gone to, but there are other states that are. Now Maryland is increasing theirs from 725 to 1010 by 2018. Minnesota goes from 615 to 950 for large employers, and from 525 to 775 for small employers by August of 2016. So there are some different variations on raising the minimum wage.
And I think there are some exceptions even in Michigan, I think for kids under 18, I think it is. I thought there was some kind of a little carve out for from very young workers where they might get a somewhat lower wage over the years. I'm not sure of the numbers right now, but I think there was. But the real, as you say, the real strategy here really wasn't so much to raise the wage, although it does that, but to block that proposal.
But the Republicans accomplished two things.
Oh, they did.
By getting this through. They were able to paint themselves as not against raising the minimum wage. So the Democrats can't use that going into November. How can you say they're against it? They raised it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And the other is that they managed to keep it at bay.
Keep that off the ballot.
2018, and it's still 85 cents cheaper than what everybody was pulling for.
And the key thing is, I mean, above and beyond the wage itself, the key thing is that if that 1010 proposal was on the ballot, the Democrats hoped that was going to drive up turnout. That the one thing Democrats hope to do to win this election is to have a big turnout. They always have a low turnout in these midterm elections, as they did in 2010. So one of the big worries they have is, well, if Democrats don't vote, they're going to get beat up again. So the hope was that if this was on the ballot, that would be kind of the main fuse to get Democrats going to the ballot in November. Without that on the ballot, that's going to be a little bit tougher, I think.
It's interesting to note that the two state parties held their conventions 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, that's last
weekend
before this past weekend. Yeah.
And I've got to admit I'm a little embarrassed by this, but I think maybe it's because the local media around the state has not covered it very well.
There wasn't much coverage. That's true.
I don't know who's running for Secretary of State.
Oh, I tell you what, I happened to be at the convention, and I brought my list with me. We have Ruth Johnson, of course, a Republican, and Joffrey Dillard is the Democrat.
Okay, I thought that might have been.
Yeah.
There was a Free article
Yeah.
that had a misprint in their caption, and they listed. Is it Joffrey Dillard?
Yeah, Joffrey Dillard. Where's my spelling here? Oh no, I'm sorry, Godfrey Dillard. Correction.
Dillard.
Yeah.
They had him listed as running for Attorney General.
Oh no.
And
no.
they had Mark Totten
Oh,
for Attorney General also. And I thought,
No, that's
how
funny.
did they come out of a convention with two candidates for Attorney General? So I was guessing that Godfrey was probably
Yeah.
the Secretary of State candidate. I don't know very much about him. You were at the convention?
I was at the convention, at least the Democratic one on Sunday. Wasn't there on Saturday. Dillard, a very, very well-spoken guy, articulate kind of guy. The only problem he's got is that I think he was an attorney for Kwame Kilpatrick at one point, and he may have had some other problems, some other clients who was not on the not the most salient of clients you'd find.
So he
Yeah.
runs the risk of being guilty by
I
association.
think so. I think we're going to hear that in the campaign.
Now, that will be interesting because the current, the incumbent,
Ruth Johnson.
Ruth Johnson, is not, I don't really think of her as somebody who attacks opponents
I don't think so. And again, as
in the way that he sounds vulnerable.
Yeah. I mean, who knows who's going to run the ads? But yeah, I mean, somebody did mention. Oh,
Well,
yeah,
you
he was
know,
the
you know
attorney
there
for
are, that attack ads are pack ads.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, nobody wants to take credit for those anymore.
Call so and so and tell him he's a no good loser.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
I didn't say vote for the guy, so you don't have to. It's really not a campaign ad. But call Congressman so and so and tell him he's an
Magic
idiot.
words.
Yeah.
It's those magic words. This and the reason that we bring this up and get into some of these state races is because this is also the kickoff of the campaign season.
Oh, yeah,
this come out of Labor Day.
This is the traditional. The traditional kickoff.
It's hard to tell when they start and stop it.
Yeah, I mean, how long? We've been campaigning for. The governor's race has been going on for at least most of this year, and in some ways, even the nominees
Well,
were
that's
fairly
because
clear
we
at the
had
end of
so
last
many
year.
of the state offices leapfrogged the campaign.
Oh, yeah.
The primary campaign.
Yeah, and the primary became, for some of the statewide offices, almost irrelevant because the major parties had pretty much made their choices. I mean, it was pretty clear that Mark Schauer was going to be the Democratic nominee. There was no race there.
Gary Peters,
same
Senate
thing. There
seat
was
for
no race
Carl
there of any
Levin's seat.
consequence. And so on the statewide level, both the Republicans and the Democrats seem to have made the choice that they almost wanted to minimize the primary. So the primary election...
The Republicans, of course, they have incumbents. So they avoided a lot of primary battles. Although
the little bit of Tea Party stuff going on at the Republican convention on the previous weekend, the big question was whether or not Brian Calley, Lieutenant Governor with Snyder, was going to get dumped off the ticket. For some reason, the Tea Party folks didn't think Calley was conservative enough, and they made an attempt, although it unsuccessful by a large margin, an attempt to dump Calley off the ticket and stick Snyder with their nominee, a guy they considered normally much more conservative than Calley. But in the end, Snyder got his way at the Republican convention.
And the guy that took on Lieutenant Governor Calley made a very impassioned. What was it, Nakagiri?
Nakagiri.
Nakagiri.
Yeah. I think Mark Nakagiri.
He made a very impassioned plea for unity.
He did.
At the end of the convention, which he actually handled himself pretty well, considering it was it was a bit of a dust up.
And again, there were some quotes that I heard about some Tea Party folks at the Republican convention saying, "Oh, okay, they lost. They're not going to vote for their guy. They're going to sit it out." Now, there may be a few folks like that, but I think in the end they're probably going to turn out more than likely. But they were less than happy on that issue, although In the primary in August, they didn't do too badly. They got a couple of their people on the ballot, and maybe they may well be elected in November.
Do you think the minimum wage increase that went into effect today in the graduated system is actually going to end up being two questions? Do you think it's taken some wind out of the sails of the Democrats for getting out to vote in November?
Oh, I think so.
And the other being, do you think it puts the matter to rest, or will it be challenged 2 years from now when
That's a good
the
question.
rest of the country is at 1050 and
we're still
we're at 879 or whatever
yeah,
it is.
wherever it's going to be in a couple of years. Yeah, no, I don't think it's going to be a totally dead issue. Because actually, if you take the minimum wage over the last 30, 40 years and gear it to inflation, it is still relatively speaking, still a fairly low rate historically. The very peak for the minimum wage was, I think, the late 1960s, where that was the equivalent of about $10 or $12 an hour today. It's generally gone down for the last 30 years. I mean, it's kind of a rocky road, but a gradual slope downwards. So, yeah, it'll be an issue. But as I say, it was a hot-button issue that really generated a lot of excitement. And frankly, the Republicans outflanked the Democrats on that by passing this. I think they did take a lot of wind out of their sails.
Well, according to this rundown by the AP, there are 96,000 Michigan workers that were earning at or below the minimum wage in 2013. 3.8% of Michigan's roughly 2.5 million hourly workers. Nationally, about 4.3% of hourly workers make minimum wage. A couple of interesting things here. Democrats and minimum wage advocates secured a victory by tying the minimum wage to inflation in the new law. The wage will increase annually with inflation by up to 3.5% starting in 2019, unless state unemployment is 8.5% or more in the previous year. That seems like a lot
formula.
of ifs.
Yeah, there's a lot of qualifications.
It's like if we're
there.
doing good, it keeps going up.
Yeah.
If things are a little rough, all bets are off.
Yeah, there's a lot of qualifications there, and that by that time they could change a lot of laws anyhow.
But here's the interesting thing. According to this AP interpretation, the measure which Democrats have sought for years will limit the need for future legislative battles over raising the wage.
That's true.
If it automatically is, if it's tied to inflation. But that says after 2019. I think the discussion we were having a moment ago about what happens now, that's stuff that goes on before 2018.
Oh, yeah.
That's stuff that goes on a year from now, 2 years from now, the court challenges.
Yeah, it could be. But as I say, I think it's going to be a bit harder to mobilize an excited batch of voters for this issue compared to what it would have been 6 months ago. And actually, this idea of outflanking the petition drive by putting something a little bit different into law also applied to the wolf hunting issue. Remember that there may or may not be some wolf hunting issues on the ballot, but a new law on wolf hunting may make those attempted petition drives void as well, and particularly by adding. There's one kind of thing that cannot go on the ballot: appropriation. So if you appropriate money for a project, right, it can't go on the ballot. So they appropriated something like $1 million for some study of wolves or something, and by doing that, it effectively took that issue, or could take that issue off the ballot.
Now, this is interesting. According to AP, the law increases the hourly minimum for workers who get tips to 38% of the general minimum wage.
Okay,
from $265 currently to $352. AP is saying a major catalyst for Republican efforts to block the ballot drive was that it would eliminate the tipped wage scale and apply the 10-10 minimum to all workers. Now, I know the Restaurant Association and the National Federation of Independent Businesses and other organizations were really vocal. They put a lot of money.
They were really worried about that.
They did some serious lobbying on this.
Yeah.
But I really don't think that was the major catalyst for Republicans. I think they wanted to basically thwart the ballot
I think
initiative.
so. No, I think politically that's exactly it, because that could have been a hot button issue. In fact, one presentation I saw at one of the conventions was a look at how many Democrats do not vote normally in these these midterm elections. It's around 900,000 or so voters. And again, if Democrats can get half those folks out, that can make a big difference. But if 2014 is like 2010, Democrats are going to get rolled over in a pretty messy way.
Once again, if you'd like to join the conversation, if you have any thoughts on the things that we've been talking about, whether it's Michigan's minimum wage, the lack of labor celebration in what by most accounts is is ground zero for the 20th century labor movement, Flint, Michigan. If you have any comments on any of those things, feel free to give us a call at 208-1854. That's 810 area code 208-1854. We'd love to hear from you. And again, this is kind of the inaugural of doing these Tuesday afternoon chats. Tuesdays with Rozycki. That's what I should start calling it. But actually, if you'd like to sponsor these and see us keep going with these, feel free to get in touch with flinttalkradio.com, care of Steve Myers or John Wilson. Let them know your interest, and we'll work it out from there. Hopefully, we can get some people interested in keeping this going.
That's right.
We'll continue to do some fun things. As I mentioned, coming up in just about 5 minutes or so, we're going to cut to an interview that I did earlier today with a best-selling author. Her name is Andrea Portes. She's got a new book called Anatomy of a Misfit. It's right here. It looks like it's for back to school, but it may be not, because there's some kind of rough stuff that happens in here. But she's very interesting. I think you'll enjoy the conversation. She's her first novel, Hick. It was her debut novel, and was made into a feature film with, several stars, including Alec Baldwin. And as you will hear in the interview coming up, her new book has already been tapped for a potential movie.
Oh, very good.
So we'll hear about that in the interview coming up. In the meantime, if you'd like to join us, 208-1854 is the number to call. We're talking state politics. The convention's just over with a little over a week ago. The new minimum wage went into effect today. What about the numbers for Mark Schauer? Are they...
Some interesting stuff happening there, at least by one poll within the last week.
Well, you and I have talked about this because the election has been going on since the late 50s.
That's right.
It seems like it's been going on forever, and we've talked about this. Michigan historically will not drop an incumbent governor.
No governor has lost a second term, an election for a second term, since the '64 Constitution went into effect.
Well, and we had
Jim Blanchard lost a third term.
But wasn't that about the time that term limits were making the rounds?
They were getting angry
pushing for that.
They came in 2 years later, and that's why John Engler was in office, and they didn't apply to him. John Engler was the only governor to have served, at least with the current Constitution, to serve 12 years. But after that, you can only serve 2 terms. But Engler served 3 terms because the term limits came in '92, didn't apply to Engler.
It didn't count against his current term.
Yeah.
He had 2 more.
That's right. Yeah.
Interesting.
But since that time, the governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, at least all of those, all are limited to 2 terms apiece since '92.
And
of course, state
3 in the House,
three in the
and
House,
Senate.
and 2 in the Senate for the state legislature.
Right.
Yeah. And some debate, some real serious debate about whether or not those term limits really made sense, especially for state lawmakers, because so many, especially in the House, state lawmakers say after 6 years you're done, and you barely learn what you're doing with the job, and all of a sudden you've got to move on to something else.
But I wonder with Governor Snyder, and is this going to be who gets out the vote, or does it rest on moderates, how they feel about how the economy is doing, and what happens I mean, the numbers look good right now, but is that, are the positive votes for shower warnings to the governor that we're unhappy with you?
It could be.
You know,
In fact,
and when
yeah.
it comes right down to pulling the curtain and checking the box, are they going to revert back to Snyder?
They may very well, and because again, what's surprising is there's still an awful lot of voters who don't know who Shower is. By some calculations, almost a third of all the voters in the state don't even know who Mark Shower is. This late in the campaign, so to speak. What works in Shower's favor is that Snyder's negatives are still very high. 50, by one recent poll, 58, 59% of the voters
Well, there's
are
going to be a
dissatisfied with
pushback
him.
factor on right to work.
Oh, yeah. Oh, in fact, what surprises me so far is how little that's been mentioned. I thought that would be by now a super big hot button issue, but it gets mentioned here and there, but it's nowhere near as big as I would have thought.
They're really working seniors
Yeah,
on the tax.
the tax thing, you're
change.
seeing the ads on that. Another big issue is women voters. Women voters tend to drop out at a higher rate than normal, so you look at a lot of those ads on TV for both Shower and Snyder, and a lot of them are clearly geared toward female voters.
Now, we've got just a couple of minutes left before we go to the interview with Andrea Portes. And I wanted to mention, we talked very briefly about the Secretary of State. That was, for me, the only real news that came out of the Democratic convention. And
That's about it, pretty much.
there was really no news.
There
out of
was
the
a little
Republican
bit of a dust-up. It wasn't much of a deal, but for the state Supreme Court, for the Democrats, they nominated, let me try and find that here, Richard Bernstein, the well-known attorney who's got all the ads, and William Murphy. Now, William Murphy is an appeals court judge who is pro-life, and there was a brief walkout of female delegates when he was nominated. Now, he says he supports Roe versus Wade and all that, but his personal view is very pro-life. And
Well, at the
there was a
top of the
backlash on
ticket,
it.
at the top of the ticket, they've got Mark Shower and, of course, Lisa Brown,
Right.
who is well known to state Democrats for
That's
her
right.
positions on women's issues.
Yeah.
And that was a good move on Shower's part.
I think so. And then she'll prove to be, I think, a very strong campaigner.
I was betting when the Secretary of State came out, I was betting it was going to be Woodrow Stanley.
There was a lot of talk about that. Yeah, there was.
Was there at the convention?
Well, I know I'd heard it earlier. There was at the convention. It was pretty much a done deal. But no, earlier on, I had heard that being discussed. Now the rumor I heard, and this is I didn't talk to Woodrow or anybody else, although he was at the convention, by the way, and I did talk to him about other things. But the rumor earlier was that he didn't want it for whatever reason. And I can't verify that's true. I just happen to have heard that from someone.
Well, you know, it's kind of interesting because he took a little beating on his seat, even though he was term limited out.
Right, yeah,
He threw his support behind Omar Simpson,
he did.
who got pretty well crushed
He
by
really,
Sheldon
yeah,
Neely.
Sheldon Neely really ran.
We might get into that a little bit more when we come back. We're going to have we're going to go to our interview with Andrea Portes right now. But join us back at the top of the hour for round two. We're going to do another full hour, and hopefully we'll have some callers join us. My guest this hour is a best-selling novelist of the critically lauded adult novel Hick. The book was her debut and has since been made into a feature film starring, among others, Alec Baldwin. Bury This was her second novel, published in January of this year. But she joins me now by phone to talk about her new book, Anatomy of a Misfit. My guest is Andrea Portes. Andrea, welcome.
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me.
I have to ask you, because I'm from Michigan, where the title Anatomy of a Misfit comes from.
Well, actually, HarperCollins gave it to me because I had a different title for the book. It was originally called Stupid Faces.
Now, we're kind of doing a back-to-school thing because today is sort of the first day of school for a lot of school districts around the country. And I noticed that this book is actually written for young adult readers. What's the difference? But I mean, does it change what you write or the characters? How are your adult novels different from this?
Well, I feel like sort of when I'm writing an adult novel, I handwrite it and I sweat and grunt about every different word and sentence. And with a YA, it's more sort of about the communication. It's almost like I'm trying to talk to someone who's right there, and it's a little bit more colloquial and immediate. I really like writing it. It's fun. It's not. I don't have to sweat over making some beautiful sentence that could be poetic.
Are you conscious of the reader when you're writing?
No, because if I do that, I will write really bad stuff. It's just, I think if you really are thinking about the reader or the result, it's just a recipe for bad writing.
Now, I was reading a little bit about your background, and it says that I'll quote from a press piece that was sent to me. After her relentless education, Andrea moved to the neighborhood of Echo Park in Los Angeles, where she spent years mostly getting into trouble. What kind of trouble are we talking about here, Andrea?
I mean, nothing too crazy. It's just that at that time, I had been a straight-A student my whole life, through Bryn Mawr, through graduate school, and I just, when I graduated, I was a little bit burnt out, so I sort of went and lived in Echo Park, and there was a bunch of crazy kids. Most of us, knew each other from college around there, and we were just silly, 20-something. But also, in answer to your question about the YA, I mean, the reason sort of why I wrote this was I was fulfilling a promise, because my ex-boyfriend in high school, a horrible thing happened to him, a horrible tragic incident, and I made a promise to myself that I would tell his story somehow to the world, and eventually I actually got to the point where I could, and so this is sort of me keeping a promise.
When you mentioned Bryn Mawr, that's in New York, isn't it?
It's outside of Philadelphia. It's in mainline Pennsylvania, where everybody speaks with their locked jaws.
I know the type.
Yes.
And could I have a Tylenol? But seriously, how did you end up, Andrea, going from the East Coast to the West Coast?
Well, okay, it was my best friend. She ruined me. So what happened is I went from Nebraska.
The best friends usually do.
Yes, exactly. I went from Nebraska to Bryn Mawr, and I was, on a straight, track to whatever boring thing I was going to do. And my best friend brought me out to LA the summer after my freshman year, and that was it for me. I was like, oh, well, that's where I'm going to be living forever.
And now I want to get
Hello?
back. Yeah, I want to get back to the title of the book again, Anatomy of a Misfit. Why Misfit? Why do you think they chose the title Misfit as opposed to, I don't know, Rebel or some other?
Well, Annika is a misfit. I mean, she's the third most popular girl in the school, but she has blonde hair and blue eyes, but inside she's sort of spider stew. She's, there's something wrong with her, and she's not exactly perfect. She's not a perfect girl. And also, the first most popular girl torments her and calls her half-breed an immigrant because her dad is a foreigner, which in Nebraska is actually a big deal. And then everything goes awry when Logan, who was a nerd, shows up, and now he's cool with his moped and listening to the Smiths. And Annika's interested, but Becky says, no, he's just a nerd on wheels. So that sort of sets the stage for all of these things that happen in high school. But everything is sort of interrupted when there's this tragic event, and that sort of leads us to bigger picture issues.
When you're putting together characters, whether it's for a young adult novel or an adult novel, how much are they based on people you know?
That's such a good question. So they're usually based on one person, and then I usually sort of throw a lot of other stuff in there that I find, interesting. Like in Hick, Luli, the character that Chloe Grace Moretz plays, is based on me, but then I threw in a lot of stories from, some of my friends and things like that. And the character Becky Vilhauer is a composite of lots of different people who are basically the mean girl, the mean, most popular girl in everyone's high school kind of thing.
And which comes first, the characters or the situations?
The characters, actually. I really feel like the characters kind of drive the thing. If I sit down and I say, this is what's going to happen, my characters always do whatever they want, and they don't let me, which is good. That's good. That shows that you've written characters that are, that are filled out, because they tend to have a mind of their own.
Now, as I was reading the intro, I talked about your second novel, Bury This, which came out in January. And here, it's, what, 8 months later, 9 months later, and another book. How much, what's your writing schedule like?
Well, it's very difficult because I have a 4-year-old boy named Wyatt. We have a 4-year-old, so that is very tricky. But I'll try to do my writing in the morning and get all of that stuff out from like 5 a.m. to about 7 a.m. and then I get my son ready and take him to school, and then I'll try to get some writing done after that. And then by the end in the afternoon, I'm just completely discombobulated, and that's sort of when I do boring things and waste a lot of time on the internet.
One of the most prolific writers of our time, of course, Stephen King, was asked whether he writes to a schedule or to the muse. Which is it for you?
It's a little of both. I mean, I try to keep to the schedule, but, most writers are genuinely slothful people. So I try to keep to the schedule, and I do pretty well. But then the muse kind of makes up for it, because I'll be in a situation, whether it's driving around or in the shower or wherever, and all of the great ideas will start coming, just sort of flying out, usually at the weirdest moment. So I have to immediately grab a notebook and start writing down. And my fiance has seen me do it, and he just kind of giggles and chuckles to himself.
You'll love his answer. He said, "Oh, I always write to the muse. Fortunately, the muse shows up every morning at 9 o'clock."
Oh, he's lucky. I do feel that it's good to sit down and try to write, because, sometimes if you wait till it's perfect, you'll never write one word.
And that's another interesting thing in the writing process. How much time do you spend editing versus creating?
Well, I have my own process, which is I just like to write the whole first draft, just boom, just get it out there, and know while I'm writing it that it's going to be absolute garbage and I'm going to hate it, and it's just going to, but I just try to get it out there. Like, that's it. And then I go back, and then I don't look at it for 2 weeks. Then I go back and I start looking in, and I usually say, hey, this isn't so bad, except for this, and this. And then you just kind of go in and you start tinkering. And then after that, then you know that your editor will give you a bunch of notes, and you'll yell at your editor in your head for a day, and then you'll realize, okay, she was right, or he was right, whatever it is, and then you go back in, and hopefully it's it's as close as it can be to perfect, but obviously it's never perfect.
Right. Is it true that you wrote your first book, Hick, by hand in 5 notebooks?
Yes, it is true. I wrote my first book, Hick, by hand in 5 notebooks all over the world, because my brother he lives all over the place, so I would go visit my brother. So I wrote some of Hick in Paris. I wrote some of it in Tokyo. But then Bury This I wrote in 3 notebooks here in LA, because I was pregnant with my son Wyatt and I had nothing to do. So I wrote that over those 9 months.
And is that about the normal length of time it takes to write, or?
I've realized, well, it took me about 10 years to write Hick, but some of those years I wasn't really doing much. But Bury This, it took 9 months, and then Anatomy of a Misfit, it took less time than that. It took about 5 months. So I'm getting faster and faster as we go.
When, well, and with Anatomy of a Misfit, did you write that by hand too, or have you graduated to word processors with the rest of us?
I have graduated when it comes to YA. I have graduated to word processors, but when it's literary fiction, I like writing it out. It's actually a different part of your brain if you're writing than if you're typing, and I find that the part of my brain that is the writing part is the kind that makes sort of, weird poetic sentences. So I'm going to keep that part.
What got you started writing in the first place?
I don't even know. I was always doing it when I was a kid. I mean, I never called myself a writer. Like, I wasn't a 10-year-old with a beret on or anything. But I was writing. I was writing, really bad poems about how the Russians were probably going to kill us because it was all about the Cold War. And then I graduated to, teen angst. And actually at Bryn Mawr, I realized I didn't really have much to write about because I had lived such a sheltered life in a way. So basically those 10 years in Echo Park were great because I got to kind of get out of my demographic a little bit, and I think that was very helpful for understanding some things about humanity that I otherwise wouldn't have understood.
Well, if you grew up during the Cold War as I did, when you got to Echo Park, it was probably your turn to make big trouble for moose and squirrel.
Maybe.
But getting back to the Anatomy of a Misfit, is the timing of the release of this book got anything to do with back to school?
I don't think so. I mean, the bigwigs over there at HarperCollins kind of decide this stuff, and we writer types just sort of obey. But I think it was probably good because the thing does start. The first day of the school year is when Logan drives up on his moped, and so I think that. In that way, it's sort of well-timed.
Do you look at everything that happens now as potential fodder for a future novel?
Yeah, I mean, I always do. It's interesting. People always say, you should put me in a novel, or you should put this in a novel. And what they don't realize, first of all, is the things that they say you should put this in a novel are never that interesting. And also, you should never ask somebody to put you in a novel because you don't know what they think of you, so they might write something horrible. But it's exciting too because Paramount just bought this, so now we're working with my writing partner and turning Anatomy of a Misfit into a movie.
Oh, nice.
For Paramount.
Nice.
Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah.
When did you get the word on that?
Well, there was a big old fight over it over the 4th of July weekend. Actually, it was very exciting. All the studios wanted it, and so we got a preemptive offer from Paramount. They called us on a Sunday, and I was sitting there looking with my phone in one hand, looking at my son who's playing in the sandbox, and saying, "Well, I think we should take this deal. I want to send my son to college."
Well, it seems like an appropriate weekend for fireworks.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right.
Is it weird for you when you've written a book and you've gone through the editing process and you finally come to terms with the project as it stands, and then another group comes in and starts rewriting for a movie?
Not so much. I mean, both of Hick, I wrote the screenplay, and in this one, I'm writing the screenplay with my writing partner. So it's not so bad. I don't like particularly writing screenplays. Like, I would actually never write a screenplay from scratch just by myself, because I don't like doing it. I mean, a novel, you can make things out of whole cloth. You can say Led Zeppelin is playing, and this is happening over here, and this thing. You can put things in there that cost $1 million. A movie, they will say you can't have Led Zeppelin. They'll never give you the rights. They cost $1 million, or you can't have this explosion, or you can't. You know what I mean? So you have to kind of have this business head on writing a script, which you don't have to have writing a novel. You can just make whatever you feel like.
You make it sound like every scene in the novel is a crane shot.
Yeah. Well, no, but even things that you would never think would be expensive, like in Hick. Hick's a road movie. Well, it's a kind of like a road movie. They're in the car a lot of times going through the great American kind of out west. Well, what I didn't realize is when you're shooting that, you're on this thing called the process trailer, and it takes forever. And so I remember on the set saying to myself, oh my God, I will never put a scene in a vehicle again.
Just on the off chance that it will become a movie?
Well, I don't know. So far Hick was a movie. Now this is going to be a movie, and Bury This is in negotiations to be a movie. So I think probably being in LA helps. So I have, I definitely have it in my head. The problem with the process trailers, they move they do the scene, so you drive, and then they have to drive all the way back, and then do the scene again. So it really is like very time consuming.
Getting back to writing and the writing process and going forward, do you have multiple projects planned, or do you do one and then you're done?
I like to do a project from start to finish, just because I can spaz out and do 20 different ideas at the same time, but then I'll sort of never get anything done. So I kind of I have one thing on my desktop, and it's that until I'm finished, and then it's sort of like on to the next thing. So right now I'm doing Rich Kids, which is another YA for HarperCollins, and then the next one after that is the literary fiction for whichever publisher decides, whether it's HarperCollins or my old publishers, whoever decides they want it. But but I know exactly what that is, and it's sitting there like waving at me, but I'm not even going to work on it because I'm working on Rich Kids.
Do you outline the story? Do you know the beginning, the middle, and the end when you start, or the handwriting in journal books almost implies that it's free form, that it's off the top of your head?
Well, that's a really good question. A lot of people have different process. Some people outline every little thing, every little scene, all that stuff. I'm not really one of those people. I kind of know. I know the characters. I know vaguely what's going to happen. Vaguely, I sort of see the end. I try not to see it too well, and I kind of go and kind of let the characters lead me. And because a lot of times they do things that you can't believe that they are doing, but then, some people need to have it dialed in. I find that it's boring work if I do that. If I sort of decide that this is what it is, and then it doesn't come out very well. So I need to write it longhand, and then I'll sit at the end of a chapter and say, oh my gosh, what needs to happen next? What can I do next? And then I know, and then I'll wait till it comes to me.
And one of the things that I wanted to ask is if there are writers who inspire you. Yes,
absolutely. There's one writer in particular who is sort of my big inspiration right now, which is Joyce Carol Oates. I love her so much. I have all of her books. I have all of her books by my bed, and well, not all of them because there wouldn't be room. But I have, Blonde and We Were the Mulvaneys and all of that, and I just love her writing. I think she's just really incredible, and I just, she's prolific. And I just think she's the best thing there is.
And are you a big reader? Do you read a lot?
I do read a lot. I wish I read more. My favorite authors are, Joyce Carol Oates, Philip Roth, Kurt Vonnegut. I love Edith Wharton. And then I love Shakespeare. I have a volume of Shakespeare also by my bed that if I'm ever sort of I have nothing going with my writing, I'll open it up and I'll try to get inspired by, the master.
I always give guests on the program an opportunity to share with people how best to follow their work. Do you have a website and ways that people can contact you and or get the book?
Yes, I do. I have all of that stuff. There's the AndreaPortes.com website. I'm also on Facebook, Andrea Portes, and Twitter, Andrea Portes. And everyone can get the novel on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble if they want to go to their local bookstore. That's great too. And so I'm out there in a big way.
Well, I'll tell you, you're a delight to talk to, and you don't sound the least bit like somebody who would cause a lot of trouble.
Well, you should have seen me in my earlier days. But it's good. I'm a respectable person now.
But in spite of that, the book is fun and interesting, and we'll get into plenty of trouble within the pages of Andrea Portes' book, Anatomy of a Misfit. Andrea, thank you so much. It was a delight chatting with you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
All right. And the book, as I mentioned, is Anatomy of a Misfit, and the author is Andrea Portes. And this is part of our kind of an inaugural webcast here on flinttalkradio.com of the Tom Sumner Program, a back-to-school edition. And we'll be back with more with Flint's premier political pundit coming up right after this.